On a Tuesday that had promised nothing unusual, the electricity went out at 7:42 p.m. There was no dramatic thunder, no crashing wind, no warning flicker. One moment the apartment hummed with its quiet, dependable sounds, the refrigerator breathing softly, the hallway light glowing like a patient star, and the next, everything fell into a gentle, complete hush. Mara was standing in the kitchen, rinsing a single teacup. The water still ran, silver and steady, but the world around it had turned dark. For a second, she simply listened. In the absence of electricity, the silence felt thick and velvety, like a curtain drawn across the evening. Outside her window, the city had dimmed. The neighboring buildings were squares of shadow. A few distant car headlights moved slowly along the street below, like quiet boats drifting across a black lake. Mara turned off the tap and dried her hands carefully, as though she were completing a small ceremony. She knew where the candles were. Everyone who lived alone kept candles somewhere, even if they forgot about them most of the year. She opened the drawer beside the stove and found them, 3 ivory tapers, slightly bent from summer heat, and a small box of matches. The cardboard rasped softly as she struck the first match. A brief golden flare bloomed in her hand, bright and alive. Then came the candlelight, steady, warm, and unexpectedly comforting. The flame made the kitchen feel smaller, kinder. Shadows leaned gently against the walls. The cupboards looked older in this light, less practical and more storied. The ordinary shapes of spoons and jars gained a kind of quiet importance. Mara carried 2 more candles into the living room and set them on the coffee table. The room rearranged itself around the glow. The sofa, usually plain and gray, softened into a deep charcoal sea. The bookshelf stood like a patient forest at the edge of the light. She checked her phone. No signal. The battery was already low. She smiled to herself and set it face down. There would be no scrolling tonight. No blue light. No endless current of news or voices. Just this, a small circle of gold light and the slow unfolding of time. She sat cross-legged on the rug and let the quiet settle around her shoulders. At first, her thoughts raced forward, reaching for what was missing. Should she call someone? Should she check the breaker? Was the whole building dark? But the urgency dissolved quickly, like sugar in warm tea. There was nothing to fix. The night, it seemed, had simply chosen to be different. Outside, a faint breeze brushed the windows. Somewhere down the street, a door closed. The world had not ended, it had only softened. Mara leaned back against the sofa and watched the nearest candle flame. It moved in small, patient gestures, tilting, straightening, bowing to invisible currents of air. In its light, the room felt like a memory. Not of anything specific, but of something older and slower. A time when evenings arrived without screens and left without alarms. She drew a blanket around her shoulders and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, she felt no pressure to be anywhere else. The night had grown quiet enough to hear her own breathing, and in the hush of a city without electricity, Mara began to understand that this unexpected darkness might be a gift, an invitation to sit still, to notice, and to rest. The candles burned steadily. The evening stretched ahead, unhurried and wide. The candles had settled into a calm rhythm, their flames steady and self-contained. Mara watched as thin threads of smoke curled upward whenever one of them leaned too far and corrected itself. The apartment felt warmer now, not in temperature, but in spirit. Without the low electric hum she had grown used to, the building revealed its quieter language. There was the soft ticking of cooling pipes inside the walls. A faint creak from the hallway floorboards as someone shifted their weight in a neighboring apartment. The distant murmur of voices drifting up from the street, unamplified and unhurried. Mara realized how rarely she truly listened. Usually, evenings were layered with sound, a podcast playing while she washed dishes. Music filling the background, messages chiming gently for attention. Even silence had been structured by the subtle buzz of appliances. But tonight, the silence was whole. She reached for the kettle out of habit, then paused, smiling to herself in the dimness. Electric. Of course. Instead, she poured cool water into a glass and carried it to the sofa. The candlelight shimmered faintly through the surface of the water, making it look like liquid amber. She sat down and tucked her feet beneath her, feeling the soft weave of the rug under her toes. The air seemed thicker, slower. Time, too, had lost its sharp edges. A car passed below, its engine louder than usual without the competition of other sounds. Somewhere, a window slid open. A neighbor laughed softly. The world was still awake, just dimmer. Mara let her shoulders relax. She noticed the sound of her own breathing, the gentle intake, the easy release. It felt steady, like waves meeting the shore at night. She placed one hand lightly on her chest, then on her stomach, just to feel the movement there. Inhale, exhale. The candle flame flickered in time with the smallest shift of air. It seemed almost alive, attentive to her presence. Her thoughts began to loosen. Instead of jumping ahead to tomorrow's tasks or replaying conversations from earlier in the day, her mind drifted toward simple observations. The way wax gathered at the base of the wick. The faint scent of something warm and slightly sweet. The way shadows leaned across the walls like tall, patient figures. She wondered how many evenings in history had unfolded exactly like this, lit by fire, shaped by quiet, held in darkness that was not frightening but gentle. She imagined entire towns centuries ago, moving through nights guided by candles and stars. Conversations spoken more softly. Stories told closer together. The sky, perhaps, brighter without artificial glow. A subtle calm spread through her. There was something reassuring about knowing that this way of being, this slower rhythm, was older than electricity. Older than wires and switches and glowing screens. Her eyelids felt slightly heavier now, though she wasn't tired yet. Just softened. She stretched one arm toward the coffee table and adjusted the nearest candle, turning it slightly so the wax wouldn't spill unevenly. The small act felt meaningful, as though she were tending something important. Outside, the wind brushed the building again. Inside, the silence held steady. Mara leaned her head back against the sofa cushion and let her gaze rest on the ceiling, where candlelight trembled in quiet patterns. The shadows moved like slow water. Nothing demanded her attention, nothing beeped or blinked. The night had become a gentle container, and within it, even the smallest sound felt like a companion rather than a disturbance. She closed her eyes for a moment, just to listen, and in the soft dark, she began to feel as though the world itself had taken a long, peaceful breath. After a while, Mara stood and carried one of the candles to the window. The glass felt cool beneath her fingertips. She unlocked it and pushed it open just a little. Night air slipped inside, soft and curious, carrying the faint scent of damp pavement and distant trees. Without the city's usual brightness, the sky had changed. It was deeper now, less gray, more truly dark. And within that darkness, a few shy stars had appeared. Not many, but enough to remind her that they were always there, waiting for the lights below to dim. Mara rested her elbows on the windowsill and looked out. Across the courtyard, other apartments glowed faintly with candlelight. Small, golden rectangles floated in the black shapes of buildings. In one window, a figure moved slowly past the light. In another, two silhouettes sat close together at a table. It felt strangely intimate, this shared blackout. For once, the building seemed united by the same gentle inconvenience. No televisions flickered. No blue light flashed from screens. Just pockets of flame, each one steady and patient. The breeze shifted the candle beside her, and its flame leaned toward the open window, dancing but not extinguished. She listened again. Without electricity, the night sounds felt closer. Leaves rustled somewhere below. A bicycle rolled past with the faint click of its chain. A dog barked once, then settled, and above it all was a kind of vast, soft silence, like a blanket laid carefully over the city. Mara tilted her head upward. She had not truly looked at the night sky in months. Usually, it was a background, something she passed under on her way home, something dimmed by streetlights and apartment glare, but now, the sky felt present. She traced the faint outline of a constellation she half recognized. Perhaps it was Orion, though she wasn't entirely sure. It didn't matter. The stars didn't require names to be beautiful. A sense of perspective washed over her, the day's small worries, unfinished emails, unanswered messages. A conversation she had replayed too many times, felt far away now. The sky was enormous. The stars were steady. And here she was, leaning on a quiet windowsill, breathing in cool air. It was enough. The candle behind her cast her shadow against the opposite wall, long and soft-edged. She noticed how gentle it looked, how forgiving. In this light, there were no harsh lines. She closed her eyes and let the night air brush her face. Inhale slowly, exhale fully. The rhythm came naturally, as though her body had been waiting for this pause. A cloud drifted across the small patch of visible sky, briefly veiling the stars. Then it passed, and they returned, unchanged. Unbothered, Mara smiled. There was comfort in their steadiness. In knowing that even when unseen, they remained. After a few more quiet minutes, she closed the window most of the way, leaving just enough space for the cool air to slip through. She carried the candle back to the coffee table and sat down again. The room welcomed her with its warm, golden hush. Outside, the sky stretched wide and patient above the sleeping city. Inside, the candles continued to burn, small suns in a temporary night, and Mara felt, perhaps for the first time in a long while, perfectly aligned with the dark. The apartment had grown so quiet that even the smallest intention felt significant. Mara found herself thinking about tea again, not the quick, distracted kind she usually made between tasks, but the slow kind. The deliberate kind. She rose from the sofa and walked back into the kitchen, carrying one candle with her. Its flame lit the counters in soft curves of gold, turning ordinary objects into something almost ceremonial. The electric kettle sat useless on its base. She ran her fingers along its cool surface, then glanced toward the lower cabinet. There, pushed slightly to the back, was the small camping stove she had bought years ago for a weekend trip and barely used since. She smiled. It felt appropriate. She set it carefully on the stovetop and placed a small metal pot on top, filling it with water from the tap. The quiet click of the igniter sounded louder than expected, and then a small blue flame bloomed beneath the pot, not bright, not loud. Just steady. Mara leaned against the counter and watched the water heat. In candlelight, even this simple act felt ancient. Flame beneath metal. Water slowly warming. No buttons. No timers. Just observation. Tiny bubbles began to form along the bottom of the pot, clinging to the metal before drifting upward. The sound was gentle, a faint, growing murmur. She opened the cupboard and chose a tin of loose chamomile. The dried flowers inside were pale and delicate, their scent soft and faintly sweet. She spooned some into a small strainer and placed it in her favorite mug, the one with the faint crack along the handle. When the water began to tremble with heat, she turned off the flame and poured it slowly over the flowers. Steam rose in thin ribbons, catching the candlelight like silk. The aroma filled the kitchen, warm and calming. She carried the mug back to the living room, the candlelight guiding her steps. The steam curled upward as she sat, wrapping her face in gentle warmth. For a moment, she didn't drink, she simply held the mug between her palms and felt the heat seep into her skin. Her shoulders dropped another inch. Her jaw loosened. The apartment felt smaller now, but in a comforting way, like a cabin in the woods or a quiet room during a storm. She took a slow sip. The tea was delicate and mild, carrying a softness that matched the evening. It spread warmth through her chest and into her stomach, settling there like a small, glowing ember. Outside, a faint murmur of voices drifted upward again. Someone laughed softly, then hushed themselves, as if remembering the unusual stillness of the night. Mara drew the blanket tighter around her legs and leaned back into the sofa. Another sip. The candle flames had shortened slightly, their wax pooling at the base. They seemed unhurried, content to burn at their own pace. Without the usual rush of evening routines, she noticed how each action unfolded fully. Lifting the mug. Swallowing. Setting it down. Breathing. Nothing overlapped, nothing competed. The world had narrowed to warmth, light, and the steady rhythm of her breath. She closed her eyes and listened to the faint sound of the tea cooling in her cup. The blackout had not been inconvenient after all. It had rearranged the night into something slower, more intentional. In the gentle glow of candlelight, with chamomile warmth spreading through her, Mara felt herself drifting, not into sleep yet, but into that quiet space just before it, where thoughts soften and the body begins to trust the dark. The candles flickered softly, the tea steamed quietly, and the night held her without hurry. After finishing her tea, Mara sat for a while longer, watching the last curls of steam disappear into the dim air. The mug rested empty on the coffee table, a faint trace of chamomile lingering in its warmth. She felt neither sleepy nor restless, just suspended in a quiet in-between. Her gaze drifted toward the small wooden desk by the wall. It was an ordinary piece of furniture, often cluttered with unopened mail, spare keys, and the practical debris of daily life. But tonight, in candlelight, it looked different. Softer. Almost inviting. She carried a candle over and set it carefully on the desk's corner. The flame stretched upward, illuminating the brass handle of the top drawer. Without overthinking it, she pulled the drawer open. Inside were things she hadn't touched in months, perhaps years. Old photographs tucked into a rubber band. A dried sprig of lavender wrapped in tissue. A stack of postcards from places she had once visited or meant to visit. She lifted the photographs first. The top one showed her standing on a windy shoreline, hair tangled across her face, laughing at something just outside the frame. She couldn't immediately remember who had taken it, but she remembered the wind. The salt in the air. The feeling of endless horizon. In the candlelight, the photograph seemed warmer, as if memory itself were glowing. She set it aside and picked up another. Her family gathered around a small kitchen table during a winter evening years ago. Everyone leaning inward. Everyone mid-conversation. There was something about seeing these moments without electric light that made them feel closer to their original time. As though candlelight was the natural habitat of memory, she traced the edge of the photo with her thumb, not lingering too long on any particular detail. The past did not feel heavy tonight. It felt gentle. Next, she untied the bundle of postcards. Their edges were slightly worn. Faded stamps. Handwritten notes that slanted in familiar ways. "Wish you were here." One read. "Someday we'll come back," said another. Mara smiled softly. So many plans have been made in moments like those, spoken easily, with faith in the future. Some had unfolded. Some had not. And yet, sitting here now, she didn't feel regret, only gratitude for having lived those days at all. The candle flickered, and she noticed how the flame reflected faintly in the glossy surface of one postcard, creating a tiny second sun. She placed the photos and postcards back into the drawer, not in a hurry, but with care. Each item returned to its place like a stone set gently into water. At the very bottom of the drawer lay a small notebook with a fabric cover. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were fragments of thoughts, half-written ideas, quotes she had copied down, small hopes she had scribbled late at night. Some pages were filled, others were blank. She read one line that simply said, "Remember to notice the quiet." Mara exhaled slowly. It felt almost as if the past version of herself had written it for this exact night. She closed the notebook and rested her hand on its cover for a moment. The drawer slid shut with a soft wooden sigh. The candle beside her burned steadily, patient as ever. Shadows pooled gently around the desk legs, and the apartment seemed to breathe with her. There was comfort in knowing that her life, its moments, its memories, existed not only in glowing screens or digital archives, but in tangible things she could hold: paper, ink, wood, light, breath, stillness. Mara carried the candle back to the center of the room and settled once more onto the sofa. The night continued, unhurried, and somewhere within its quiet embrace, she felt both who she had been and who she was now, resting peacefully side by side. The candles had burned lower, their flames now smaller but no less steady. Wax had gathered in pale pools, thick and slow-moving, like time itself. Mara shifted on the sofa and listened again. There, just beyond her door, a soft sound, footsteps in the hallway. Without the usual electric buzz, the building carried sound differently. Each movement traveled farther, gentler but clearer. The footsteps paused outside her apartment, followed by a faint knock, not loud, not urgent. Just a polite tap against wood. Mara stood, taking one candle with her. Its light stretched across the walls as she crossed the room. For a moment, she hesitated, not out of fear, but out of unfamiliarity. Evening visits were rare. She opened the door. In the dim hallway stood her neighbor, Elias, from 2 floors down. He held a flashlight in one hand, though it wasn't turned on. In the other, he carried a small lantern that glowed faintly. "Hi," he said softly, as though the dark required gentler voices. "Just checking if you're all right. Whole building's out." Mara smiled. "I'm fine. It's strangely peaceful." He nodded, glancing at the candlelight behind her. "It is." The hallway smelled faintly of dust and warm metal cooling inside the walls. Other doors were closed, but thin lines of golden light slipped out from beneath a few of them. "We're going up to the roof for a bit," Elias said. "Some of us. Sky's clearer without the lights. You're welcome to join." The idea lingered between them, simple and kind. Mara looked back into her apartment, the sofa, the candles, the soft cocoon she had built for herself. Then she looked at the stairwell behind him, dim but inviting. "I might," she said. "In a few minutes." He smiled, nodding once. "No rush. We'll be there." The door closed gently after him. Mara stood still for a moment, the quiet settling again like a familiar shawl around her shoulders. The roof. She had lived in this building for 3 years and had only gone up there once. During the day, when the sun was too bright and the city too loud, but tonight was different. She returned to the living room and placed the candle carefully in a small glass holder for safety. She slipped on a sweater and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders like a loose scarf. The thought of climbing dark stairs didn't feel inconvenient. It felt adventurous in a small, manageable way. Before leaving, she paused. She turned toward the candles and watched them for a few steady breaths. Inhale, exhale. The apartment no longer felt like a retreat from the world. It felt like a place she could return to. She opened the door again and stepped into the hallway. The air was cooler there. Softer. The stairwell was lit only by the faint glow of scattered lanterns and the occasional phone flashlight used sparingly. Shadows curved along the walls, bending with each step. Her footsteps echoed lightly as she climbed. On the landing between floors, she passed Mrs. Ionescu from 4B, holding a small oil lamp and smiling as if this were all part of an arranged evening. "Beautiful night," the older woman whispered. Mara nodded. "It really is." Up another flight, the air grew fresher, touched by the outside. A door at the top of the stairs stood slightly open, revealing a wash of deep blue darkness beyond, and above it all, waiting patiently, was the sky. Mara felt her heart lift, not quickly, not dramatically, but with a quiet anticipation. The blackout had opened something, not just the night, but the building. The neighbors. The sky, and perhaps, something within her too. She stepped through the final doorway and onto the roof, leaving the dim stairwell behind. The city stretched out below, hushed and glowing only in fragments, and above, the dark sky unfolded, wide, endless, and softly brilliant. The rooftop felt like another world. Without the usual city glare, the sky stretched wide and velvety above them. It was not completely dark, far from it. Stars scattered across the expanse in quiet abundance, more than Mara had seen in years. They shimmered softly, patient and undemanding. A small group of neighbors stood or sat in loose clusters. Someone had brought a thermos. Another had wrapped themselves in a thick wool blanket. A lantern rested near the center, its glow faint compared to the sky above. No one spoke loudly. It was as if everyone instinctively understood that this night required gentler voices. Mara stepped farther onto the roof, feeling the slight texture of gravel beneath her shoes. The air was cooler here, brushing against her cheeks and slipping beneath her sweater sleeves. Elias stood near the edge, hands resting lightly on the low concrete wall. He turned when he noticed her and smiled. "Worth it," he said quietly. She followed his gaze upward. It was, the constellations were clearer now, their shapes more confident. A faint milky band stretched across part of the sky, subtle but unmistakable. The city, usually so loud with light, had dimmed enough to reveal what had always been waiting above. Mara leaned against the wall, her blanket tucked around her shoulders. For a while, no one said anything. A soft murmur drifted from the far side of the roof, two neighbors sharing a quiet observation about a satellite passing overhead. Someone else pointed gently at a flicker of movement that might have been a plane or a falling star. The stillness felt communal. Shared silence had a different quality than solitude. It was warmer somehow, like sitting beside a fire without needing to speak. Mara tilted her head back and let her eyes adjust fully to the darkness. The longer she looked, the more stars appeared. Tiny, distant lights emerging from what first seemed like empty space. She took a slow breath. Inhale, the cool night air filling her lungs. Exhale, warmth drifting into the open sky. The city below seemed to be holding its breath too. Traffic was lighter. Windows darker. The usual restless energy had softened into something almost rural, almost ancient. Elias spoke again, barely above a whisper. "I forget how big it all is." Mara nodded. It was easy, in daily routines, to shrink life down to schedules and screens. To measure time in notifications and deadlines. But here, under this vast canopy of quiet light, those measures felt small. The stars did not rush, they did not blink for attention, they simply existed. A gentle breeze moved across the rooftop, stirring loose strands of hair around Mara's face. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened, not to conversation, not to machinery, but to the open air itself. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed briefly and then faded. A reminder that the world continued, even in dimness. But here, on this rooftop, there was only presence. Someone passed her a cup from the thermos, warm herbal tea. She accepted it with a soft thank you, feeling the heat seep into her palms again. Steam rose and disappeared into the night. The group remained scattered, yet connected by the shared upward gaze. No one checked their phones. No one seemed eager to leave. Time stretched gently. Mara felt something within her settle into place, a quiet alignment between breath and sky, between body and space. She realized that darkness was not emptiness. It was depth, and beneath the steady watch of distant stars, surrounded by quiet neighbors and the cool embrace of night air, she felt both very small and completely at peace. The candles below in her apartment continued to burn, the city rested, and above them all, the sky shimmered on, timeless and serene. After a long while, no one knew exactly how long, the chill in the air began to settle deeper into their sleeves and collars. One by one, neighbors exchanged soft goodnights. Not the hurried kind spoken in elevators or stairwells, but slower farewells, as though they were closing a shared chapter. "Sleep well, Mrs. Ionescu murmured to no one in particular. "You too," someone answered. Mara took one last look at the sky. The stars were still steady. Unbothered by whether she stayed or left. A faint satellite traced a patient line overhead, silent and unassuming. The city remained dim, as though reluctant to reclaim its brightness. She exhaled, long and slow, and followed Elias toward the stairwell. The descent felt different from the climb. Quieter. Fuller, their footsteps echoed gently against the concrete walls. The lantern light cast curved shadows that shifted with each step. Somewhere below, a door opened and closed with soft care. "Feels strange," Elias said quietly. I almost don't want the power to come back. Mara smiled in the dim light. Me neither. But there was no resistance in her voice. Only acknowledgement. They parted at her floor with a nod. Good night, he said. Good night. She stepped back into her apartment and closed the door behind her. The candles had burned lower. One had nearly reached its end, the flame small and determined. The air carried the faint scent of warm wax and chamomile. The room felt unchanged, yet subtly transformed. As if it had absorbed something from the rooftop, an expanded quiet, Mara moved slowly, as though preserving the softness of the evening. She extinguished one candle gently, pinching the wick between dampened fingers. A thin ribbon of smoke curled upward, dissolving into the dim air. Then another. She left just one burning on the coffee table. Its flame flickered, smaller now but steady. She washed her mug in the kitchen using the last of the warm water from the pot. The simple act felt grounding. Water against porcelain. Cloth against ceramic. The quiet rhythm of care. Back in the living room, she folded the blanket neatly and placed it at the edge of the sofa. She paused by the window, glancing out once more. A few more windows had gone dark. The night was deepening. Without turning on any lights, there were none to turn on. She prepared for bed by candlelight. Brushing her teeth felt almost ceremonial. The mirror reflected a softer version of her face, lit by gold instead of white glare. There were no harsh angles, only warmth. When she returned to the living room, the final candle was close to its end. Wax had pooled thickly around its base. The flame danced gently, then steadied. Mara knelt beside it. For a moment, she simply watched. The entire evening had been shaped by these small, steady lights. They had guided her hands, softened her thoughts, illuminated old memories, and opened the sky. Carefully, she leaned forward and blew. The flame flickered once, twice, then disappeared. Darkness settled, complete but not heavy. Her eyes adjusted quickly. Faint moonlight slipped through the window, outlining the edges of furniture in silver. The apartment was no longer golden. It was quiet blue. Mara walked slowly to her bedroom and slipped beneath the covers. The sheets felt cool against her skin. The pillow welcomed her head without ceremony. There was no hum of electricity, no glow from charging devices, just the sound of her own breathing and the distant whisper of night air through the slightly open window. Inhale, exhale. Her body felt heavier now, gently sinking into the mattress. Thoughts drifted lazily, no longer sharp enough to hold. The darkness felt kind, and as she closed her eyes, the quiet of the city wrapped around her like a soft, invisible blanket. Sleep did not rush, it arrived slowly, like candlelight fading into dawn. At some indistinct hour of the night, Mara stirred, not fully awake. Not fully asleep. The apartment was wrapped in deep stillness. The kind that belongs only to the hours just before dawn, when even the most restless cities seem to surrender. For a moment, she did not remember the blackout. She lay there, eyes closed, aware only of the weight of the blankets and the slow rhythm of her breathing. Inhale, exhale. The air felt cooler now. Fresher. Gradually, memory returned, not as concern, but as softness. The candles. The rooftop. The stars. She opened her eyes. The room was dim, washed in faint blue-gray light. The moon had shifted, and in its place a subtle pre-dawn glow hovered at the edge of the window. Shapes emerged gently from shadow, the dresser, the chair in the corner, the outline of the door. No artificial light competed with the morning. The world was waking on its own terms. Mara rolled onto her side and listened. There it was, the first bird, a tentative chirp from somewhere beyond the building. Then another, slightly more confident. Soon a small thread of birdsong wove itself into the quiet, delicate and unforced. She smiled into her pillow. When had she last heard the beginning of morning without an alarm slicing through it? The absence of electricity had changed not just the night, but this moment too. There was no glowing clock on her bedside table. No notifications blinking. No immediate reach for a screen. Time felt unmeasured. She let her eyes close again, not to return fully to sleep, but to rest in that gentle space between night and day. Her body felt deeply relaxed. Not heavy with exhaustion, but settled. As if something within her had been smoothed out by the darkness. The birds grew slightly louder. A distant door closed somewhere in the building. Pipes shifted softly in the walls. Life was returning. A pale ribbon of light stretched across the ceiling, widening almost imperceptibly. The sky outside was transforming from ink to charcoal to the faintest silver. Mara breathed slowly, matching herself to the rhythm of the waking world. Inhale, cool, morning air drifting in through the slightly open window. Exhale, warmth sinking back into the mattress. She felt no urgency to rise. There was nothing to check, nothing to scroll, nothing to catch up on, only this quiet unfolding. Eventually, she pushed the blankets aside and sat up. The wooden floor felt cool beneath her feet as she walked to the window. She opened it a little wider. Morning air entered fully now, carrying the scent of damp stone and distant trees. The sky was pale and luminous, free of glare. A few early risers moved along the street below, their steps unhurried. The city looked softer in natural light. Mara rested her hands on the windowsill and watched as the horizon brightened. For the first time in a long while, she had witnessed the entire arc of a night, from unexpected darkness to star-filled stillness to the gentle approach of dawn, and she had done nothing extraordinary. She had simply been present. The blackout might end at any moment. The lights might flicker back on. The familiar hum might return, but this quiet, this memory of how the world feels without constant illumination, would remain. She closed her eyes briefly and let the morning light warm her face. The night had given her something simple and profound, proof that darkness could be peaceful. And that within it, she could rest. Mara stayed by the window as the morning brightened, watching the sky shift from silver to pale gold. The birds had grown confident now, their songs weaving through the courtyard like delicate threads. The building was beginning to stir. A faucet turned on somewhere below. A chair scraped softly across a floor. A door opened, then closed with gentle restraint, as if everyone were still honoring the quiet gift of the night. She dressed slowly, choosing comfortable clothes, moving without the usual invisible clock pressing at her back, and then, without warning, a soft click, a distant hum. The refrigerator came alive in the kitchen. The faint buzz of electricity returned to the walls. Somewhere, a microwave beeped triumphantly. Lights flickered on in neighboring apartments, one by one, reclaiming their familiar brightness. The power was back. Mara stood still, listening. The sound was not harsh, but it was unmistakable. The building had resumed its modern rhythm. Invisible currents rushed through wires. Systems awakened. She walked into the living room. The lamps, still switched on from the night before, now glowed brightly. Too brightly. She reached out and turned them off. The room returned to morning light, the softer, truer illumination spilling in through the windows. For a moment, she considered picking up her phone. It lay on the coffee table where she had left it, dark and silent. She picked it up, the screen blinked to life, flooding her eyes with color and icons. Notifications stacked themselves neatly across the display. Messages, updates, reminders. She looked at them, then she turned the phone face down again. They could wait. Instead, she opened the windows wider, letting fresh air flow through the apartment. Sunlight pooled across the floorboards, warming the places where candlelight had flickered hours before. She noticed the small traces of the night, a hardened pool of wax on the coffee table, the camping stove still resting on the counter, the neatly folded blanket. Evidence of a slower rhythm. She cleaned gently, not to erase the night, but to complete it. She washed the small pot and returned it to the cabinet. She scraped cooled wax into the trash and wiped the table clean. She folded the blanket once more and placed it carefully on the sofa. Each movement felt deliberate. Outside, the city regained its usual volume. Cars moved with purpose. A delivery truck idled briefly before driving off. The ordinary day had begun, but inside her, something remained different. The silence of the blackout had created space. The candles had taught her patience. The rooftop sky had reminded her of scale. Electricity had returned, but she did not feel rushed to return to everything else. She made her morning tea again, this time with the electric kettle humming softly in the background. The sound was familiar, almost comforting. Yet she found herself watching the water heat, just as she had the night before, not because she had to, but because she could. When the kettle clicked off, she poured the water slowly and carried her mug to the window. Sunlight warmed her hands. The sky was bright now, the stars hidden once more. Invisible, but present, Mara took a slow sip. Inhale, exhale. The world had resumed its pace, but she did not have to match it entirely. She could carry a fragment of candlelight within her, a memory of how quiet felt. How darkness held her gently rather than threateningly. Perhaps there would be other blackouts someday. Or perhaps not. Either way, she knew now that she could turn off the lights herself from time to time. Light a candle. Open a window. Listen. The hum of electricity filled the apartment once more, but beneath it, steady and calm, was the softer rhythm she had rediscovered. And with morning fully arrived, Mara stepped into the day, not hurried, not heavy, but rested. The night by candlelight had ended. Its quiet glow remained.